The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, Matthew's going to take it right from the get-go, and it'll be a little bit of a review of what we did last week, but there's also some new stuff too. So there you go, Matthew. It's all yours.
So this week we're going to do something similar to what we did last week because this is kind of for new trial users. But I'm going to go into a couple new things. I'm going to show you some more tools for getting started against HGSI. So here we've got HGSI up. It's updated as of this afternoon. So it's got end of data through the end of Wednesday night. And we're going to start in the designer again because I like starting in the designer. So once again, we're trying to find stocks. And so we need to create a filter to do that. And we're going to pick a fishing pond to start with, and in this case I'm going to go with one of the major market index components. Now I read something this week that said the Russell 2000 and its small cap emphasis was doing really well, and so let's start fishing in the Russell 2000 instead of the S&P 1500, which was what we used in the last seminar. So we're going to go to that, expand out the groups all the way to the major market index components, and then underneath there is the Russell 2000. You can also get to the Russell 2000 quick by typing Russell 2000. Oh, helps if you spell it right. You can find the Russell 2000 really quickly by using the search up at the top. It's kind of a nice shortcut if you know what you're looking for. You can also find other groups, like for instance, we have ETF components, and so you can see the other Russell 2000 components, that other group folders that have the words that you're typing in them. So it's kind of a handy little way if you're trying to find something. But in this case, I recommend just knowing that this major market index component actually exists. So now we've got, it's only 1792 securities. You can see the count of securities up at the top. So the Russell 2000, it changes, I think, quarterly, and the lists get updated at relatively strange times, but it's not unusual for it to have somewhat less than 2,000 stocks in it. The small caps tend to go out of business and get merged and bought out a lot. And then the Russell 2000 is short until they rebalance the index. So you press the filter button at the top of the toolbar to bring up the filter, and click on user filters, and let's start making a new filter. So I recommend always naming your filters so you'll remember what you were talking about. So we're going to do this one. So the filter basically is it's a statement. It starts with the word if, and then there's fields, and there's operators and values. And so the fields is one of our many field names, and the field names are categorized by major categories. There's also a copy of all the fields under the all category. So if you know what you're looking for, you can just go into all and scroll down through to find alphabetically the field you're looking for. Or you can use the search to type the field you're looking for. After a while, you'll get used to knowing where things are. So today we're going to do some looking for volume. And so yesterday, the the volume, yesterday's volume of the stock versus its 90-day moving average of the volume is the percent volume of the 90-day field. And so we're going to look for stocks with a high volume yesterday relative to its 90-day moving average of the volume. Now, I haven't done this yet, so I don't know what's going to come out. And so this is where the preview feature can really save you a whole lot of time, because you can bring up the preview and it'll show you the fields you specified in this bottom part and the stocks that meet the field. And so it gives you a way of knowing what kind of values you want to enter into the value column without having to actually do so much work. Now, remember, you have to drop down the group and pick the folder you're going to be looking in, or else you'll be in all securities, which might not be what you want. And you can also sort these columns to see the range. So like this guy's volume yesterday was 1,816% over its 90-day moving averages volume. So the volume yesterday for this stock was huge compared to its normal volume. And if you look through the list, if you scroll through the list, you'll see a bunch of stocks were above 100% of the 90-day. And so, and then a lot of them obviously weren't so high. So to find that big volume spike, we're looking for something that that's well above their 90-day moving average. So let's go with 100 and see what that gets us. And so yesterday, only 148 stocks were above the 100% of the 90-day moving average. So that's not a bad place to start, but we need to add some more rules to narrow this down. And since we're fishing in the Russell 2000, I think we're going to probably want a little bit. We're going to be a little bit pickier about market cap. So I think market cap's in billions. So let's see, about 1,000. So that cuts us down to 49, which isn't too bad. It's still a little more than I was kind of wanting to hunt through. So let's up this again, and let's see what we've got here. Let's take just the top part of this, the big stocks that had big volume yesterday. So let's go with 4,000. So now that's a nice small group. So I'm going to say, okay, this is my fishing filter for today, and I'm going to apply that. And so there's the stocks that are in the Russell 2000 that meet this filter. Now, this filter, when you change to another group, will apply to that group. So if I go to all securities, you can see there are 56 stocks that had big volume yesterday and are bigger than 4 billion. So you can, once you create one of these filters, you can then use it against any group in your database. I'm just using the Russell 2000 because they're an interesting group of stocks. And so the best thing on these kind of stocks, once you get the list down small enough, is to open the chart. And that's way too big. So as you can see, this is Wednesday, the close Wednesday, and you can see how high the volume bar here is versus its normal volume bar. And so when viewing stocks, obviously you can pick one of many charting views, but today we're gonna let's make a new view that's specific to this kind of prospecting we're doing, and I'm gonna call this and so in the view all the chart views, it has this 2-tab view configuration dialog, and so you can choose the date range, and generally you're going to want to show them all because otherwise you end up not seeing the whole chart. Now, some people like to have a little extra room on their charts, and that's where you add it here in this extra periods on the chart. So it'll add 10 extra blank days on this beginning part of the chart. And then you can also specify that you want a different kind of chart and not a daily. You can have weekly, monthly, or quarterly by default with that view. But you can also change this every time using this little button in the bottom of the charting. So I'm just going to add a couple of extra periods on this one. And now, when you add indicators to the default view comes up with just the price and volume. And you don't actually have to keep these like this. You can delete these windows and put in any windowing combination you'd like. But since we're looking at the moving average volume, so let's add the moving average to the volume indicator. And so I'm gonna pick the volume window and say add indicator, and then I'm gonna add a moving average, and inside the moving average you can pick the field, and so that's where I'm gonna pick volume, and I'm gonna add a 90-day moving average, and I'm gonna make it let's make it a different color just for the sake of it, and then I'm gonna so this way I can tell what it is. The system will help you somewhat remember some of your what you set things up as, but as a rule, having tags on your moving average is generally a good idea. So let's just okay this and bring it up. So there's the 90-day moving average of the volume. And you can see how yesterday was such a high day relative to that 90-day moving average. So this was a big spike. The stock dramatically moved, and then you can change the stock you're looking at. You can use these little arrows. You can also use this drop down, and notice how the filter still applied, so it's only showing the stocks that met our filter criteria. So you can go through these, and you can see how each one of these ones, the stock is dramatically above the normal moving average. So that means that was a high volume day. And those kind of days are generally major signals. I mean, stocks don't move without massive increases in volume, either to the positive or negative. And in this case, that's one of the things we're going to be looking for. These first two stocks they moved up yesterday on this big volume. But for example, this stock, it didn't move up. It had big volume and it moved down. So one of the things that we might want to do is tweak our filter so that we only find stocks that are moving up on big volume and not stocks that are just that could have went either way. And then you have situations like this where this gapped up massively and stayed up for 2 days in a row. There must have been some sort of buyout, I would imagine, or pending with this kind of volume. Might be too late to chase that. And here's another, I wouldn't be surprised. Now, remember, these are all coming from the Russell 2000, so these stocks generally tend to be small cap enough that people buy them out entirely. And that's one of the things that you can look at is in the charting, this fundamental panel, and you can bring in the fundamental panel using this button here. The fundamental panel will show you information about the industry group, and there's other panels that you can get to using these up and down arrows, and you can see what its market cap is. So it's a $5 billion company. It's only got 37 million shares outstanding, and most of the shares are out. So I wouldn't at all be surprised if these kind of pops are buyout related. And you can get this data right on the chart without having to go in and set up a warehouse field and set up a view in the warehouse to show them. Well, let's go through a couple more of these and take a look and see what we got. And then you've got stocks like this that had a high volume day yesterday, but didn't really move anywhere. I mean, the open and close are inside. It's an inside day essentially. So one of the things that can be really useful on these stocks when you're prospecting and you'd like to know why it did what it did, you can use the right-click menu and go more info from web, and we'll go to various websites and bring up the symbol on that website. And so you can do a Google Finance search, and it'll open up your browser. And you can see what Google could find for this. Now, Google used to actually have more news-related stuff, but they've recently changed. Some of the other more info from web options give you a faster way to find out about the stock. You can start looking for news on Google and Yahoo and MSN Money, Bloomberg. There's a bunch of websites that we've hooked up that can be really useful when trying to figure out, stocks don't move for no reason at all usually, and the news can kind of help you figure out the direction there. So one of the things that I wanted to show off last week, and we didn't really get a chance to, was how to use some of our more complicated features at figuring out how good or bad a specific trading rule is going to be for you. So in this case, the rule here is fairly simple. The stock just has to be above a certain value. So one of the things HGSI has, one of its more powerful features is what we call a visual filter backtest, and that's this guy. And basically it allows you to apply a filter as long as the filter only consists of technical fields against the history of the stock. And this will let you see what days that filter would have been true on the stock in the past. And so now in this case, the filter rule we has two rules. One, the volume has to be a spike, and the second one is the market cap has to be very high. And filter rules that aren't purely technical will be only evaluated against the last update and not values in the past. Only technical fields can be correctly backtested. So in this case, it'll apply the charting filter, but it's going to give it's only going to show, it can only evaluate the technical field. So if you made a filter with a lot of our rules that are based on things that aren't technical, then this charting indicator won't be able to find it. And so I'm going to modify our filter so that we're not looking at market capitalization. We're just looking for the volume, since we now have the list of stocks we were interested in. And I'm going to call this and so the green bars are every day that the stock's volume was above 100% above the 90-day volume. And you can see how often this stock has triggered this. And so you can kind of get a feel for whether this technical parameter is going to be a tradable thing. And you can see right in here that it had a little bit of a run there, but it really wasn't what you'd call a buying opportunity. I'm not sure that this alone is going to be the greatest signal. In this case, I wouldn't at all be surprised if it'll fall off. You can then go back through and look at some of the other stocks that met your filter and see how well you can kind of visually see the results of the filter as you apply. So that's more of an interesting takeaway on this. Now, let's go back and we're going to duplicate this filter, which I should have done before I changed it. And I'm going to edit this one to put back in the market cap. Now, when we created this charting view, we set it up with this filter so that it would use whatever the filter you have applied in the chart. And that's why you didn't get an error when you apply it. But if you actually pick a specific charting view, and so it doesn't use whatever's applied in your filter, if it had fields that aren't valid, you will actually get a warning on it. Let me show you what that looks like. It'll tell you that it contains rules that aren't valid for backtesting. And what it's complaining about there is that the market cap isn't something we actually have historical values for. And so in this case, the green bars are the days that this stock met the volume requirements. And now I've got the filter applied that's so we can see the smaller number of stocks. And I don't know if this looks like a super great trading rule. You would, if you made this your entry point, you would enter these stocks an awful lot. And I'm not really sure it's going to pan out for that. So let's go back to the designer. So here we've got our list of stocks, and so we want to make a group out of that list. So we go to the file menu and say make group, and we'll make a new group for this. So we can have our own group, and we can make an index. And now we can take this filter off if we'd like. Now, one of the things that you can do with HGSI after you've created a fishing pond, in this case, we took the Russell 2000, we applied a filter, and we got these stocks, and then we made this into a user group. And so one of the things HGSI will let you do is called a group inclusion report. And there's a whole bunch of videos on the web of showing how to use this group inclusion report against our various smart groups so that you can see which smart groups stocks are showing up in. But one of the more interesting things that you can do in HGSI is every week, every day, we create these top 50 lists, which are stocks that met various criteria across our various smart groups. And we keep them archived. We keep a year worth of data. And so one of the interesting things is any of the stocks, the question is, if any of the stocks we found today, this small list, has shown up in these lists in the past. And this group inclusion report is a way of doing that. And so you pick the groups you'd like to see what stocks are in which of the groups. So we'll pick this one, and let's say we're mostly interested in the last couple of months. So the last 3 months, did these stocks show up? And then when you run, now you can make a report, you can make a group from this report. But when you're just asking the question, it's easier to just set it up so that it runs the report like this. So when you check these top level boxes, it'll check the children, but there's also buttons for checking children and checking all boxes. The more stocks you select, obviously, the more the group inclusion report will show up. So you've got to kind of, you might want to limit your checking to just the groups you're really interested in. And you can load and save the selection of groups that you're going to use for this if you're going to find yourself doing it more than once. So let's just see what we get here. So this is just the report. I'm not going to make a group out of it. And so you can see this company showed up in 39 groups, but they're all the top 50 groups. None of them are are in the one we made today. I don't think. So in your browser, you can use, it's just a regular browser. So, all right. Now I'm going to rename this group so that I can find it. And it remembers the selection from the last time. So if you want to make some changes. So now I'm looking for this phishing and see if any of these stocks, and so here we go. It's not a big surprise that only one of them showed up, but this SRPT actually showed up in a number of the top 50 groups, as well as today's phishing expedition. And there's probably more than one. And so this NSP box is in 4 of the groups. So it showed up first on our scans back on the 18th, the 20th, and now the 21st. That one's only on 2, and then we're going to get down to a bunch of stocks that only showed up in one group, which is just the phishing group. So what you really want here is the ones up at the top of the list that it showed up in the most number of groups. And then go to the charting and choose that one to take a look at. And so this guy has actually been showing up in our scans for a very long time. And then it showed up in this new scan we created just for today that's looking for these big volume spikes. And you can see why this stock's probably showed up, the massive amounts of volume and the fairly epic line here culminating in the other day when it joined in. Now, we have a bunch of zoom functionality with the charting. I tend to use the buttons on the toolbar, but you can also use the Alt keys to do the various levels of zoom. You can zoom directly to one of the levels. You can also just Alt plus and minus in and out. So, and basically it makes the chart bigger so that you can see the individual days. And then if you ever want to get a more natural view, you can hit the default zoom button here and it'll zoom back out. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this was some sort of buyout. But it is interesting that using the group inclusion report, you can find that it's been showing up in various scans. You can also use the group inclusion report for if, say, every day you begin a routine of running your own filters against some set of stocks, whether the S&P 500 or the whole all securities, and then every day you apply your own filter and you make a group out of that day, and so you end up with a collection of groups, just like we collect these groups for the top 50. And so each day we've collected these groups for every day of the week that the stock market's open. We collected these groups, but you can also do the same thing for your own trading system. And so you end up with a kind of history of interesting stocks that met my criteria today, and you collect these down here in your user groups, and then you can use the group inclusion report as a way of finding commonality among a set of groups, because that's basically what it does. It takes all the groups you told it to, which could be just your user groups. You don't have to use our groups. And it counts how many times each stock appears in each group and makes the report. And then you can use this as a filtering criteria to say you had 10 historical user groups of scans that you did every Friday, and you could decide you could select all of those, and then say a stock has to be in at least 2 of them. And stocks that meet the filter criteria that you're looking for more than once tend to have better, I wouldn't say odds, but at least a clearer, they're meeting more technical requirements over a longer period of time, which is kind of a hard scan to do with charting systems that are based on looking at single stocks. You can start to see patterns. And this is what a lot of the HGSI users use HGSI for, is in that you can find what stocks, in this case here, I've checked all the months in 2018, and if I run this report, you can see that Netflix showed up 74 times out of all these days, which actually isn't a big surprise at all. Pretty much every one of the stocks in this list are going to be things you've heard about, because they've shown up over and over and over and over again. And getting that kind of data out of some software packages is really difficult, which is why we have this whole group inclusion report system. Let's see. So I was going to do, I wanted to do more on the group inclusion, because last time we did some stuff, but we haven't really covered much on the warehouse this time. And obviously, the warehouse gives you a way of seeing all our data fields all at once. So in this case, this default view shows the stocks we found today using that filter we developed, and these are what the rankings are. And now our ranking fields are not back testable, so they change every day, and the numbers kind of aren't as smooth a curve as you would imagine. But it does get you a feel for how well the earnings rank is for this stock versus the other stocks in this group. And so the rankings are 1 to 99, and obviously the group rank is very important. Groups that are doing well tend to rise all the stocks in the group. It also tends to go the other way. So having a group rank, a higher group rank, gives a certain amount of strength to these stocks. Earnings per share ranks, they do change all the time, especially right now when earnings numbers are still coming in. It's based on, it's a very complicated formula based on many quarters of earnings. And you can kind of see in the charting, when you look at the charting, how the earnings works using this little earnings graph. The earnings numbers are here, the EPS is along this line, and the percent change is here, and the EPS line is the blue, and the revenue is the red. And so you can kind of start to see why that stock has a 91. And this ranking is based on all the stocks in the database and not just the stocks in the group you're looking at in the warehouse. Well, we've been going for about 40 minutes. I think it's probably time for us to switch over and maybe people can ask some questions.
The filters that you were showing us, once you create the filter and you have it down to what you want, what you're looking for what you're doing, does that filter get saved, or is it
Yeah, no, all the filters are always saved, and so you can see here's the filters we created, and you can make new folders, and you can
oh, okay.
and then you can then drag and drop your filters into the folders. You can now normally drag and dropping makes copies. If you hold down the shift key, it becomes a move. And you can see the little plus sign there you see how the icon changes.
Yeah.
We defaulted to copy because most people, we don't want them to lose their stuff.
So you could have like a little test folder where you refine your filter to more to what you're looking for.
Yes, and one of the key usability things in filters, and I kind of showed it off, but I didn't really talk about it. Once you have a filter, I really recommend before you go in and modify, because if you modify this filter, if you press the edit button here and modify this filter, when you press OK, it saves that in, the filters you don't have to save to disk. They're contained entirely within HGSI, but we save them always. And so if you're going to make modifications, I suggest you pick the filter and hit the duplicate button. It'll make another duplicate, and you can do this as many times as you want, and it'll just keep making more of them. And then modify the duplicate instead of the original one. That way you kind of get this history going. And when you go in to edit the filter, you can change the name to remind you what exactly you did. Remove something, whatever kind of change you're making to this filter. And then when you change, when you OK that, now you have these filters can be different, but they start it from a common root core.
Okay.
You can also the other possibility. So a lot of times there are filters in our system already that are pretty close to what you're looking for, and so if you're looking, if there's a filter that already is close to what you want, just take it and you can drag it down into your user groups. You can normally drag it. I've got the filter applied, so the user groups won't show up. But if you take a filter and drag it down into user filters, you can then that's an extra copy of it, because dragging normally is a copy, and then you can edit that, or you can duplicate it right in place, which is generally easier, and then drag the duplicate. So a lot of times you can find a filter that comes with, we have a bunch in the starters for various popular stock categories. So if you wanted to start with, stocks greater than 100, you could edit this. So this is a filter we ship with the product, but you can then make a duplicate of that and then edit the duplicate, including dragging it. You can leave it where it was, and then you have to remember how to find it, or you can then drag it into your user groups so that you can organize your own filters. And the search is really your key trick. This is why I recommend naming things always. It seems like a lot of trouble at first because you go, I want a new filter, and it defaults to new filter all the time. But the mouse focus will be right on the name field, so it's easy for you to type something so that you can remember what this is about, because it'll help you when you're trying to organize all these filters, because you can easily, I mean, right now I started with nothing under my user filters, and we've already got a half dozen or so filters here that I didn't actually do anything to make. Now, this window is also resizable, so if you have a big screen, you can make this window bigger, and I recommend doing that. The bigger your screen, the easier it'll be to manage this big pile of data that you can end up with.
There is, Matthew, you're doing something there that comes to mind. It's kind of like a good housekeeping thing to do. Matthew, you saw Matthew drag things down to user filters. It is a really good and important reason to want to always pull something down, even though it's above and you can change it up there. Those things above you, where you can think of them as borrowing them. They can be changed by the owner of them, and if you've changed something, it may be lost. It may be gone. So it's always better if you bring it down and use it in your user filters.
And then edit it to your taste.
Yeah, it makes it yours. But when it's up above, it's somebody else's, and it can get changed. Same thing is true with the user charting and user warehouse.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is pretty much consistent across the whole product. We do have a bunch of stock things, and you can add in more add-ons, but the add-ons will replace, when you update the add-ons, you'll get the new stuff, and any changes you made to the old stuff will actually get overwritten, which is why I do recommend moving things. And you don't have to just move individual ones. You can take the whole folder and duplicate it if you really want it to. You don't have to, you don't have to be as picky and choosy as I'm being here. Whatever methodology works for you. The system works pretty much the same throughout the whole product. You can also export things from here to a file on the disk, and you can import things from the file on the disk. That's what these two import and export buttons are for. So if you wanted to archive up some historical stuff, but you still wanted to get rid of it, you could export it out and have it. You select the top level folder and export it out, and then you can delete it, and you could later re-import it back if you wanted to. So that way you can kind of house cleaning. There's a lot of it's kind of like a bunch of little file systems. There's the filter file system, and there's the group file system, and there's the charting view file system. And so you start to have to manage a whole lot of data that if you're organized with from the beginning, it kind of goes a little bit easier.
Matthew, Gary has a question. If you can see it, but I can read it to you if you like.
Let me see. Okay, there we go. Okay, can I export views from my laptop, from my desktop, and import to my laptop PC? And the answer is yes, you can. And it's the same kind of mechanism. So you go into the edit, choose create views, whatever kind of views you want. You can choose the thing and then choose to export it. Then it'll make a file on your disk. Warehouse views are .whs files. Other parts of the product create different files, and then on the laptop you can import them in. Now that's one way of doing it. So if you wanted to move just a little tiny bit of thing over, the import and export is a good way of doing that. If you say you just wanted to move a couple of things, there's just a couple of views here. I wanted this folder of views I want to export. Now, where things get really weird though is it makes it really hard to sync that up. And so in general, we recommend users, instead of using the import and export for syncing their laptops and their desktops, instead to use our backup feature. And on the main HGSI, we have this backup button, which will start our backup utility, which archives up everything. It's all your views, all your filters, all your settings, pretty much the entire world, and makes a zip file that is the entire world. And then you can take that file to another machine, a laptop, a second desktop, whatever you want, and then use the backup utility to restore. The backup does both. It creates backups and also restores the backups. And so this way you can move your entire world over to another machine completely. And you can save the backups on like a Google Drive or MSN Drive, any file sharing, Dropbox, I think some people actually use. If you save your backup there, you can then easily restore it on your laptop, and it allows you to keep the views much more in sync than trying to export every little thing. It's mostly a matter of how much you want to sync up. Okay.
Well, it sounds like you guys are doing pretty well. You don't have too many questions for us that we aren't already covering. So maybe that's a wrap.